welcome to this digital summit following on from our Voices of the Landscape plenary. So I'd like to welcome back Janine Yazzie, Catherine Managalido, and Nana Yao Asai Dakwa.
You got it.
Okay, so we've already had one question in, but please do send your questions in to our speakers via Crowdcast. So I'd just like to put this to everyone. What are the challenges likely to face when addressing food security and sustainable agriculture in local communities? So challenges for food security and sustainable agriculture. Would anyone like to start?
Sure, I guess I'll start. The challenges are plenty. One of the major challenges is this propensity to continue to take a market-based approach to how we look at developing sustainable food production practices. And that creates fundamental conflicts with the goals of restoring traditional food systems at a local level, with promoting agroecology and the diversification of crops, and also expanding our view of food systems and food productions to look at the way our ecosystems support a variety of wild foods, wild herbs, wild medicines that can benefit from human management and human intervention, and that are in desperate need of restorative and regenerative practices that need to become a important part of our efforts to reimagine what our agricultural systems look like. And so with the market-based approaches, we're constantly coming into conflict, because as we're trying to nurture and support and build a foundation for this different approach to restoring our food systems, we're constantly being pressured to fit it into, well, how do we take it to scale, like next year, or how do we produce food for the market, and there's no middle ground in this. We have to commit to locally, ecologically sound agricultural systems, or we're going to continue to create more and more patchwork of problems and issues for our communities and for barriers to achieving food security.
Thank you.
Okay.
In addition to that, I think, like, for example, in the Philippines, it's also like the diminishing quality of the environment, because for us, like, we're working with non-timber forest products, which includes food, the different forest foods in the community. So and also support also in enhancing or developing this indigenous knowledge or these indigenous systems that can improve food security.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think on my part, I'd like to say that the effects of climate change, it's one that remains a major threat to national food security in my country, to the extent that Ghana, being the second largest producer of cocoa, is now threatened with the fact that if we do not work to reforest our country, we're going to lose our place as the second largest producer of cocoa due to climate change. So that for us is a major thing that we have to deal with if we're going to be able to sustain ourselves, as a people. In the northern part of Ghana, for instance, the devastating effects of climate change has led to changes in rainfall pattern and the seasons, such that farmers do not now know exactly when to start their farming, seasons, because the rainfall pattern, which used to be from, say, May to August every year, has now shifted, and instead of May, sometimes the rains start coming in around July. And so people cannot really plan, because we are not too big on irrigation, and people depend on the natural rainfall for farming and all that. So this has become a major challenge to, having the food security. So climate change is one big thing.
Thank you. So we have another question. How would you address power imbalances in landscape management processes?
I feel like I'm becoming sort of like a broken record here at the GLF, but by using a rights-based approach. I think that's our fundamental argument for why it's so important to apply this framework to all of our efforts in landscape management. And it's that in order to do this successfully, we have to attack the structural inequalities at its root core. And in order to do that, we have to fully honor and implement the rights of every human being, especially indigenous peoples who are at the forefront of preserving the world's remaining biological diversity, who are at the forefront of championing the alternatives that we need, and who have maintained these communal practices in integrated landscape and water management that are vital for the solutions that are necessary going forward. And so, we can no longer accept these political or these social arguments that this type of management practice and like our concern for our environmental conditions are a separate sphere from the social and political and cultural rights that we advocate for. These things are fully integrated, they are interdependent upon one another, and we're not going to truly move forward and evolve our practices until we commit to upholding and implementing our rights.
For us, we keep on working on improving the capacities of the indigenous community so that they can effectively participate in the landscape governance. So we also look at assist them in finding ways or opportunities that they can participate. For example, in the Philippines, there's a policy acknowledging the indigenous people's mandatory representative where they can participate in local governance. So what are the needed capacities that will enhance their participation? We focus on that. And we also work with different stakeholders in also making them understand the issue of equity, that they need to support indigenous communities so that they can participate well.
So I think following on from that, how do you go about empowering the communities that you come from and that you work with so that we can kind of challenge the narratives of power over and really cultivate power within and power to? So kind of how do you work with that both from your traditional knowledge and then directly with the communities that you're involved in?
So, well, for us, as I said, we work with non-timber forest products, so it's enhancing the local forest economies, which is based on the natural resources of the indigenous community. So we participate in promoting these indigenous knowledge systems and practices. We help in integration of these practices in the local development plans, so they will be recognized. And also we promote the role of indigenous communities in the forest conservation, and we do that at the local and national level, working on looking at the different policies also, so from the national and local level.
Okay, we also believe that to be able to succeed in whatever we do, we need to work hand in hand with the indigenous people for them to appreciate the critical importance of whatever policies that we're putting in place so that we can get their participation and involvement in building that sustainability. For instance, if we take our Green Republic project that we're working on, for instance, you go into the communities and sometimes the people do not really appreciate why they need to do certain things, why they need to, for instance, shy away from cutting down trees here and there. And so it is our responsibility to be able to bring them to the table to let them really appreciate that, look, ABC will result in this, consequences if we are not able to agree on stuff. For instance, when it comes to issues of land, in Ghana, the traditional authorities, the land is vested in the indigents. The chiefs own land, not the government. And so government even goes to the chiefs if they need land for projects. But these chiefs would not appreciate the critical importance of maintaining the forest if we do not work hand in hand with them. For them, sometimes even cultural practices mandate that, for instance, in certain parts of the country, when a new child is born, they cut off a tree. So we need to be able to work to educate and sensitize them about some of these things so they can be lead actors. And once they come into that space, then we'll be able to make the needed progress that we need to make and the impact that we need to achieve together as a collective.
For us, it requires confronting historical trauma, because our communities at the local level are dealing with so many layers and so many generations of experiences of colonization, of internalized violence and lateral violence, that in order to be effective in the capacity building that's necessary, we have to be consistent and compassionate and loving in all of the work that we carry out because of that reality that we face. To change power imbalances, it's not something that can easily be put into a strategic plan and carried out in a 5 to 10 year process. It's a process of ebbing and flowing with the realities that the communities are facing, with their unique histories and their unique experiences, and providing the pathways forward to necessitate and nurture healing, to nurture empowerment, to help people remember and stand on the foundations of the things that make them strong and beautiful and powerful in themselves. And a lot of that, it takes patience to cultivate. But when you're capable of establishing those trusting and mutually beneficial relationships with local stakeholders, the progress you can make is not only, beyond what you think is possible, but it's also more meaningful and long-lasting because you've given people the tools to continue that process, and share the skills, the learning, and this pathway of healing with the next generation. And that's where the power lies, is in transferring that, because you stop the historical traumas from being continually inherited, and you give the next generation the tools that they need to become the leaders that we deserve.
And so, as I told you, interviewed Pat McCabe, Women Stand Shining, and she said that if there's any healing to be done, it's for all of us. So how can you talk a bit about how actually we are all indigenous and that we all have a relationship to land, and how can we all reconnect to land and then help that collective healing that needs to happen for all of us to really move forward together towards these more radical, as you say, but actually traditional approaches to relationship to land?
One of my dear and treasured mentors is a European woman named White Raven, who first revealed to me something that changed my perspective of colonization forever. And she revealed to me her own exploration into her unique history of her peoples, and talked about how white women were the first colonized race. And she brought it to, the whole history of European tribes and the paganist culture and religion that tied them to the land that was very similar to the values of indigenous peoples around the globe. This connection to the different phases of seasons, of the different phases of the moon, of the sun, and how that then taught these sustainable practices and behaviors of living in balance with the natural world. And she revealed that in her exploration of the development of this currency-based economy and the way that we've been slowly over generations embedded with this value of looking at resources and at Mother Earth and all of these living things around us as exploitable, lifeless things to be, dug up and developed to sell for this money that we made up, that we've created, and how that's dominated our values, began with the destruction of the priestess culture and the value of woman being the knowledge barriers of how to live in balance with all of life around us. And so when she revealed that to us, I realized, that if we take that as the starting point of colonization and we trace that and how it's spread throughout the globe and disconnected all of these indigenous communities from their own ability to define their self-determination in accordance with their values, evolving our practices as necessary to stay relevant and live within the context of our changing world, then it also means that to undo that, to heal this historical trauma and the legacy of it, means working together to reclaim those roots, to reclaim that past and those histories and the things that hold us together. Like, there's so many things that are championed as undeniable facts, right? And things that are taken and normalized as if they were part of our true condition, that really are based on spiritual mythologies, our religious practices, our interpretations of practices that are very recent. But the one undeniable fact is that every human being on this earth has come from a woman. Like, there's no way around it. I mean, maybe our technology is kind of getting in a scary place where that may not be true anymore. But at this point, every person on earth has come from a woman. And every person on earth depends on clean air, clean water, food, and the nutrients that are necessary to sustain us. If we can get back to that root, to that fundamental truth, and from there build on this evolution that we need going forward, that's how we rediscover our indigeneity, and that's how we honor one another as truly being equal and being connected and interrelated as human beings on this planet.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Nana and Kate to sort of comment on this or further this from your own perspective and your own experience. No? Said it all. That's it. Very well said. Okay, great. Well, can you kind of talk a little bit about the role of youth in the work that you do and how you're engaging with youth and what you think they want the world to hear from them?
We think that young people, we always say that young people are the future and that they are tomorrow's leaders, and yet in most parts of the world, young people are left out in the critical decision-making processes, and because we make them feel that the future is a distance away and not today, they also tend to relax sometimes, thinking that it's not yet their time to take up the leadership mantle. And so for us at the Green Republic Project, which came out from Youth Icons Ghana, what we have said to young people we work with is this, that tomorrow begins today. And so if there's anything that we need to do tomorrow, we need to start acting today to be able to shape the tomorrow that we want to see. And so, for instance, in the fight against climate change and global warming, which we are leading a lot of young people into doing, is that the effects of cutting down our trees, polluting our water bodies for purposes of ripping the bellies of the earth for gold and diamonds and all that, and the repercussions that comes with it. When we pollute our river bodies, we destroy our environment, we cut down the trees. We, as young people, are going to bear the brunt of whatever repercussions will come out of such practices. And so, the earlier, the better for us to be able to educate and invite young people to the table to try to find solutions to the upcoming challenges, because they're going to come anyway. And so, for instance, in the Green Republic Project, we are taxing young people to lead. We should not only, ask for climate justice, but to be in the forefront of the fight against climate change. Because whether we like it or not, we're going to live much longer if we go by the natural, order. We're going to live longer. Whatever is happening today, we're going to reap the benefits tomorrow. So why do you sit on the fence and not come into the mainstream and provide leadership for us to be able to correct the wrongs and to say that, look, we are not going to allow for this kind of trend to continue because our future is at risk.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
for us, the value of going back to our traditional practices is that we look at young people and value them and their contribution and responsibilities to community differently. Beginning from the age of 7, we start training our young people to be responsible, to take on these obligations that they have as being the next leaders, of being the future mothers and fathers, and community organizers, and whatever it may be, of the next generation, because we're preparing our legacy in every investment that we make with them. And so it's been frustrating, one, because I started this work, being in the youth category, and then became a mother, and now I'm very much like in this different phase of my life. But I've seen throughout that whole process this continued pattern of using youth as a talking point, using them as like a symbol for how movements or how campaigns are relevant, because they have this youth component and they're over here and attached to our projects, and not like our brothers talking here, giving those youth like the pathways to leadership that they deserve, a seat at the decision-making table, and trusting them, and believing enough that they're listening, that they're intelligent, that they're capable, and have the ability to engage in a meaningful way, and that's absolutely what we need. We're at a point now where, because we're dealing with so many embedded behaviors and values, that continuing to speak to those in power and the generation before that is just kind of stuck in their ways is not helping us. Right now, with the type of transformative change that we need, we have to give our youth a better role at the table. We have to hand them the reins of power, and we have to believe and nurture and support them and their capacity to do better.
Thank you. Actually, for us also, we see the cultural erosion and loss of the knowledge and the practices is a big challenge. So we also work with indigenous youth, and as they shared also that they want to be more involved, we just provide the opportunities for them to be active in the landscape. So and they have this so much knowledge now, information that they can utilize in contributing to the management of the landscape.
So in your opinion, what do you think are some of the key qualities of this new vision of leadership that's more collaborative and more inclusive, and how you can kind of pass these on to the youth? What would you say are some of the key attributes of the new leadership that we need?
Yeah, we desperately need this form of new leadership where, young people, women, everybody is roped in, where everybody contributes to the debate, and we together come with a collective response to the challenges that confront us as a people. If we're going to sideline key aspects of our populations, for instance, I've always said that we have two hands. And yet, in some jurisdictions, in parts of Africa, we still have challenges, issues with female empowerment, empowering our women to also play major roles in the decision-making processes, and also actively participating in the development process. So if you have males and females, and you're leaving out a whole, set of people who can also contribute to the debates, who can bring something refreshing to the debate, and you're leaving them out, it means that you are going to trail in development, because in other jurisdictions, women are playing lead roles. They are also contributing their quota to ensure that development, comes to the people. And so we are saying that we need the various blocks, young people, women, we need to take the thinking and the ideas of all to be able to conquer the battles that we have, ahead of us. We're saying that all people, black, green, blue, yellow, whatever, need to work together, because we've always maintained that, we all have something to put on the table. We all have something to contribute. The diversity that we enjoy as humans is not coincidental, is not a mistake. Why don't we have winter in Ghana, for instance? We have only 2 seasons, the rainy season and the dry season. Why do you have like 4 or 5 seasons in Europe? Why? All these things come together and make the world beautiful. And so as a people, as humans, we need to act collectively so we can make the world a better place for us all to enjoy.
Thank you.
My advice to the next generation and what this leadership, our new leadership, looks like is to reject all notions that you need to be motivated, are primarily concerned with money and with this outdated notion of power. And to not be afraid to be imaginative and creative, and to, develop all of the skills that we're naturally inclined to develop. Like there's so many artists and creative types out there that have been boxed off into like this little corner of society, and who are struggling in those boxes, when those are people who can bring the type of thinking and the type of leadership and the type of empathy and compassion that is necessary to understand our human condition in a different way. And we need our young people to know that it's okay, and that they will be supported in championing that alternative form of leadership, because we need them. We need them to create what that looks like, and to be uncompromising in that expression of themselves and of the world that they wish to see.
So courageous, inclusive, diverse leadership. Great. We have another question from the online audience. So that's: following on your thoughts on a currency-based economy, could you share your thoughts on the processes that are commodifying nature? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, that's a whole different, not whole different, but it can be a whole discussion on its own. I think that right now, one of the advantages with the technological, revolution, I guess, that we're sort of under, I use that word with a grain of salt, but is that we're looking at the markets and how they're structured, and we're trying to reimagine it, and that's what this whole development of blockchain is a new platform that could potentially lead to the decentralization of markets and create more equitable control and participation. And there's a small group of indigenous women and indigenous youth that are leading their own professional development in this new technology to try to imagine what does that look like for our economies. And I think that all of the practices that we see around us that promote this currency economy and that's unsustainable in its current manifestation is tied into capitalism, it's tied into consumerism, it's tied into manufacturing these demands for these luxuries and these needs that are unsustainable at its core, because we don't have the resources to promote this everlasting growth that we've been taught in traditional economics is the way the market needs to work. And I'm really grateful that we're seeing the emergence of these new platforms supported by blockchain that can help us reinvent, what our participation looks like, and actually revitalize our traditional trade economies, our one-on-one good exchanges that were more just, more equitable, and more sustainable at its core.
Great, thank you. So we just have a couple of minutes left, so I'd like to invite you all just to say a few closing remarks, maybe about your vision for the next steps of the communities that you work with, or anything else you'd like to share.
I keep starting, so I keep trying not to. My vision for this forum and this community that it's created, and also for my own communities, is for us to fully adopt a rights-based framework, not only in recognizing the importance of that and incorporating it into all aspects of our work, but also for my people and the communities that I come from, no longer being afraid to fully assert what that looks like, to fully exercise our self-determination, and to stand can collectively and support one another and other indigenous nations around the globe in that exercise, because we have great powers that are threatened by us doing that. And we're dealing right now with the criminalization, with the extrajudicial killings of the people who dare to take this stand. And so I think that going forward, my biggest hope is that we become stronger and more united in supporting one another in this fight, and that we don't compromise. And I keep emphasizing that because the general politics is like, oh, we got to find the middle ground between this and that. There's no finding the middle ground when it's coming to dealing with these very real threats against our existence, against our well-being and our livelihood. And that's what I mean when I say being uncompromised and being collectively united in that action.
Thank you. Kate?
Maybe also just to keep on asking everyone to continue supporting the struggles of the local communities, because until now it's really happening even in the Philippines. Most of the landscapes that we're working with have these challenges, the dams, the mining, that they feel are not good or are not sustainable and should not be happening in their ancestral domains.
For us, the Green Republic Project, our vision, our goal is to be able to contribute to the development agenda of our country and the globe as a whole, sustainable development, where we try to reconcile humanity with nature. As I said earlier, we have perpetrated too much crime and violence against nature, and it's about time we started a reconciliation process with nature by restoring the very things that we have destroyed, by acting responsibly and putting in place measures to get young people to get involved in the restoration process. Because if they do not take those steps, they are going to feel the brunt of whatever repercussions will come. And so young people must lead the charge in correcting the wrongs. Yes, we did not play a role in that, but we have a responsibility today, if indeed the youth are supposed to be the leaders of tomorrow. And it begins today, so let's act today to change the wrongs and right the good stuff that we want the world to know of.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'd like to thank the speakers for a really inspiring session. So thank you, Janine, Catherine, and Nana. And for the online audience, thank you for watching, but stay tuned because you've got the Youth Digital Summit coming up next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.